Okay, perfect. Hey, I haven't been on here for just a minute. Took a month off. Not that I didn't work, but I didn't work as much as I normally do, and I didn't do my Friday night lives, but I am back. Clearly, things aren't back to normal yet since I try to do these Friday night lives at 6 o'clock, and it's obviously later than that, but hey, this is better than what I have been doing, so I'm going to call it good. Tonight, I wanted to talk about a question that frequently comes up having to do with federal employees' sick leave. So I've called it the Great Debate. Doesn't matter where I'm teaching, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in the virtual environment, whenever I start talking about sick leave in the context of retirement, always someone says, I've heard that it's better for me to just save my sick or use my sick leave. I've heard that it's just better for me to use my sick leave and get paid for it while I'm working instead of saving it for my retirement. What I tell people is definitely a personal choice. Okay, I'm not giving advice, and I want to say that right up front with this as well. I don't ever give advice. I deal in information. So I want to tell you how sick leave works with your federal retirement, and then some things you might want to consider and leave you to do it. So 2 questions showing here on the slide, and I'm going to read them because they are emails that I've received from former students, and I want to make sure that I am getting their wording exactly correct. Okay? It says, hope all is well in your corner of the earth. Of course, more questions regarding retirement. Here at McGuire, some of the folks I work with are still of the mindset, use up your sick leave because you'll not get anything from current amounts accrued while working when you retire. I have a booklet with the formula from my last class. I'm currently over 1,000 hours accrued sick leave, CSRS. Hopefully nothing has changed. The other question is very similar. My question is, to get the 1.1 multiplier for 20 years, does it have to be day for day federal service, or does sick leave count? For example, if your service computation date is March 25th of 2002 and your 20-year day for day is March 24th of 2022, could you just go to December 24th of 2021 if you have 3 months of sick leave and have the sick leave get you to the 1.1 multiplier? So let me just talk for a minute about how sick leave actually works when it comes to the federal retirement, because there's a lot of misunderstanding. There are 2 things that are really important when we talk about retirement. They're very different. One is eligibility, and the other is computation. Eligibility means that you are old enough and you've also worked long enough to be able to draw your pension. Eligibility means you can retire. Computation is the retirement amount. It is the pension. It's the annuity payment. So you can think of that as the computation being the retirement check. Sick leave counts towards the pension. It counts towards the computation, but it doesn't ever count towards eligibility. So what that means is this. If I am a year away from being eligible to retire, but I have a year of sick leave on the books, I am a year away from being eligible to retire. I cannot ever use my sick leave to make me eligible for retirement. I've got to work to do that. But once I have worked long enough and I am now eligible to retire, the sick leave is added to my length of service when we figure out the computation, when we figure out how much that retirement check is going to be. So when we do the computation for the federal retirement, we multiply 3 things together. We take a formula, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We multiply that formula by the employee's high 3 average salary, and we multiply our answer by that individual's creditable length of service. And we've talked about that before, and we can talk about that again, but simplistically for tonight, creditable length of service is going to include any creditable civilian federal work that the person has had, meaning that they were employed by the federal government and they were also paying into the retirement system at the time, plus any creditable military service. Now that means that the individual served in the military, is now a federal civilian, and has made a military deposit or bought their military time back. Again, a topic unto itself. We're not going to get deep into that. But my civilian time plus my military deposited time plus, once I'm eligible to retire, and only once I am, the sick leave that I have on the books the day that I retire. We add all of that together to get the creditable service for the computation, multiply it by the high 3, multiply it by the formula. Now, there's a chart there I'm going to show you in just a minute, which is how we are going to take the sick leave and convert it to time so that we can then plug it into that creditable length of service line, because you're earning sick leave in hours. Most of you are. Title 38 employees have a little bit different things going on, and they have days of sick leave, but everybody else is earning their sick leave in hours. And when we put it on that creditable length of service line, it has to be as years and months and days of service. So we're going to convert those hours to years and months and days by using a chart that I'm going to show you in just one second. Some of our federal employees, before they can use the chart, are going to have to convert their sick leave even to start with. So those Title 38 employees who have sick leave in days are going to have to compute those days into hours by taking the number of days and multiplying by 8 hours per day. Our structural firefighters who are working on an uncommon tour of duty also have to convert their sick leave prior to being able to use the chart. So you can see here on the slide that I'm going to take the firefighter sick leave balance, multiply it by 40 hours, get a total, and then divide that total by the number of hours that the firefighter is working in their last weekly tour of duty. And I've got an example right here on the bottom of the screen with a firefighter who has a sick leave balance of 1422. They're currently working 72 hours. So I take that 1422 times 40, then I divide by the 72. Now I've got the total that I'm going to take and plug into the chart. If you are earning sick leave at 4 hours per pay period, and most of you are, we don't have to do a conversion first. We're just going to take the sick leave and we're going to plug it into the chart. So the chart is available on OPM's website. I'll drop a link in the comments once I finish so that you can pull up that chart and look at it for yourself. But essentially, it's going to show you one single page how much credit to give yourself for your sick leave. So because it's only a page, not every number's on here, we are going to pick the number that is closest to but higher than your sick leave balance in order to do the conversion. So let me back up just one slide and cover a brief example with you, and then we'll go into that table. So here I've got a person who's going to retire at the end of the year. They've picked December 31st, 2021 as their retirement date. Their service computation date for retirement is May 14th of 1997. So this individual has 24 years, 7 months, and 17 days creditable civilian time. Normally, their military deposited time would be included in that SCD already. I separated it just so that you could see more easily what I was doing. So in addition to their civilian time, this person also made a military deposit for 4 years, 2 months, and 8 days. They've got 897 hours of sick leave on the books when they retire. So if I go to the chart, I look for the number that's closest to but higher than 897, it's going to be 899. And now I just want to draw a straight line to the top of that column and over to the first column where the days are listed, so that 899 is at the intersection. Okay, this tells me that 897 hours of sick leave, rounding up to 899, is going to give me credit for 5 months and 5 days. So if I go back to my example, I had my civilian plus my military plus now my 5 months and 5 days of sick leave, and I add it all together. I have a total of 28 years, 14 months, and 30 days here. When we talk about federal retirement, every month is considered to have 30 days. So when I get to the bottom, and not before I do, because this is a mistake that a lot of people make, they get an answer like 5 months and 5 days of sick leave, and they assume that the 5 days isn't going to count. They're only going to get credit for the 5 months. That's not true. When I add my civilian and military and sick together, 28 years, 14 months, 30 days, those 30 days are going to give me an extra month, and 12 months, of course, are going to give me an extra year. So here, I'm going to get credit for my retirement for 29 years and 3 months. But if I called in sick for 5 days because I assumed that that 5 days wasn't going to count, and like I said, a lot of people make that assumption, then I would have to subtract 40 hours from this person's sick leave balance. They called in sick for 5 days. I took 40 hours away. They're now down to 857. If I went back to the chart, and I'm not going to just keep flipping back and forth. Again, I'll drop you a link so you can look at the chart. But if I go back to that chart now and I plug in 857, that's going to give me credit for 4 months and 28 days. Civilian plus military plus sick now are going to total 28 years, 13 months, and 53 days. 30 days gives me a month, 12 months give me a year. I've got a final answer of 29 years, 2 months, and 23 days. I also have a problem, because when I get to the bottom, after I've added everything together, if the sick leave doesn't total 30 days, it doesn't count. So this person was worried about losing 5 days. They called in sick, and as a result, ended up losing 23 days. Now, one thing, and this is again part of the big discussion, should I save it, should I use it? One thing that people aren't aware of is that that sick leave chart doesn't equate 8 hours to 1 day. It doesn't. So I said I wasn't going to clip back and forth, but I lied. I'm going to. If we look at this, 1 day is about 6 hours. It's not exactly 6 hours. So if you did the math, when you're looking at the 1 day or the 2 days, yeah, those are 6 hours each. But if you get somewhere in the middle of the chart, when I go down to 16 days, if I did the division, those are actually 5.8125 hours per day. And if I went all the way to the bottom of that first row and I did the division by taking my 28 days, then those are valued at 5.793. Why? Because when we use the sick leave chart, 2,087 hours equals 1 year. And the Office of Personnel Management says that every month has 30 days. So if I multiply 12 by 30, there's 360 days in a work year, 2,087 hours. Doing that division will tell me each of these days is approximately 6 hours. So if I'm calling in sick for 8, thinking that I've got 5 additional days, you can see where I made that mistake, right? So number one, it might be beneficial to hold on to it depending on how many days you have from civilian work and military deposited time added together. A couple of hours of sick leave might give you an additional month of retirement pay depending on where you are with that 30 days. So that's definitely something to think about. The other thing to think about was that second question that I got. FERS people are going to get a pension that is computed by multiplying 1% or 1.1% times their high 3 times their length of service, with special provision employees getting 1.7% for their first 20. That's a little bit different than everybody else. I don't get the 1.1 multiplier unless two things are both true. I don't get it unless I'm at least 62 when I retire and I have at least 20 years of creditable service at that time. I need both of those things. Now, the question was, is it day for day, or does my sick leave count to get me to the 1.1? The sick leave counts to get you to the 1.1. So in this big debate of everybody saying, I'm just going to take it. Okay, if you take it, it's as if you were working, right? Your paycheck is the same as it was. You're still earning 4 hours of sick leave per pay period, remembering that for some people it's different, but that's the lowest common denominator. And sure, that's the benefit of using it. But if you save it, and that sick leave, when it's added to your civilian and your military time, pushes you up to that 20 years, your multiplier for your entire pension becomes 1.1% instead of 1%. So there's a value of holding on to it. The other thing that I like to tell people is if you use it, and remember, I'm not giving you advice, right? Just things to think about. If you use it, it's a one-time good deal. You're paid for it. It's gone. If you save it, it becomes part of your monthly retirement for the rest of your life. So the longer you live, the more beneficial it is to have that additional time added into your monthly pension. Might be at a higher percentage, might be for a longer period of time, depending on what you've got going on. If you're not a FERS person, but if you're covered under CSRS, then there's a maximum annuity that you're allowed to receive from the federal government. And that pension caps at 80% of your high 3 average salary. If you are a non-special provision employee, right? You're not a firefighter, law enforcement officer, you're just a regular employee, then you cap out with the 80% once you work for 41 years and 11 months. People do it. They do it all the time. Sick leave can be on top of that cap. So if I'm a CSRS person and I in fact work for 41 years and 11 months, but I also have a year of sick leave on the books, my pension could be 82% for the rest of my life. So that's something to be aware of. Another thing that I somewhat caution people on is using the sick leave prior to retirement when they're not planning to retire for a couple of years yet. Sick leave is an insurance. It's an insurance policy. And the reason that we have sick leave is so that if we're sick or we are diagnosed with some illness and we're not able to work, we can still draw a paycheck. So while I may worry about having this sick leave roll into retirement, it's not so valuable for me, I'd rather get paid my wage for it. If I'm using it, it's also gone. So again, no judgment call, something to think about, right? Something to be aware of. It comes up in every class. I think it's something that people need to know about. Number one, it doesn't count for eligibility. That's a frequent mistake. Number two, it is always rounded up on the table. A lot of people don't know that. Number three, the table does not compute your sick leave at 8 hours per day. So if you choose to use it, be very careful. In my example, you saw that the person calling in sick for 5 days ended up being significantly shorter on the other end. The other thing that I want you to know is that sick leave doesn't have a cap. There's no limit to the amount of sick leave that you can receive credit for. A lot of people think there is because that chart is only one page and it only goes up to 2,087 hours. But that's because 2,087 hours is 1 year. If you have more than that, then you would give yourself credit for 1 year on that creditable length of service line, subtract 2087 from your balance, and plug the difference into the table. It does all count. Hopefully that's helpful. It's good to be back. Like I said, it was wonderful to have the time away, but really hard to get back in the swing of things as well. Don't hesitate to drop a comment in if you have questions, if you have comments, if you've thought about the sick leave debate yourself and you want to weigh in on either side. Let me know what you think. about using the sick leave or holding it for retirement. Let me also know if you have any suggestions for things that I can think about in future Friday Night Lives. I hope you're well. Take care of yourself. Stay in touch.